And I'm still a bit of a city girl. I don't like to hike alone because I'm from the East Coast and trails are much easier to find. They're well more defined.
Yeah.
And when I've even doing the, 49 Palms hike up and over the little hill to the Oasis, I can get turned around in there because I'm just not used to the paths not being as well hiked. Well marked as like a greener area would be.
Welcome to the Desert Lady Diaries podcast, conversations with women who have found their home in the Mojave Desert. I'm Dawn Davis, and this is episode 130. Find out more about the podcast at desertladydiaries.com and engage with the guests, with other listeners, and me on social media on Facebook and Instagram at Desert Lady Diaries. Just a quick note on this episode. As you know, COVID-19 protocols are morphing and changing fairly frequently, and at the time this episode was recorded, masks were optional in San Bernardino County. But at the time that this episode has actually dropped, Governor Gavin Newsom announced last week that masks were now mandatory for everyone in public.
Born in the Tri-Cities area of central Michigan, Marylee McIntyre honed her baking skills working alongside her talented mother and grandmother. When Boo's career in the finance industry in Detroit ended, she found her way to Joshua Tree in the high desert of Southern California. Unable to find work in finance, she decided to pursue her lifelong dream of baking and began selling her artisan pastries through a local cafe. Marylee now owns and operates Boo's Organic Oven in downtown Joshua Tree, offering vegan and gluten-free creations of modified family recipes. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
What was your first experience with desert?
Well, we had some neighbors back when I lived in Royal Oak, Michigan, when I was young and married, who moved to Lake Havasu, Arizona. And we kept in touch with them, and we went and visited them, and we fell in love with Lake Havasu. So about 6 months later, we drove off into the sunset and moved to Lake Havasu.
Holy smokes. Wow. So how long were you in Lake Havasu?
About a year. Didn't work out that great financially. It was hard to find work. We lived in Lake Havasu, then we moved down to actually Big River, California, in the middle of nowhere. And my husband worked out of Parker, Arizona.
Oh, okay. So not too far. What was the big industry in Lake Havasu? Is it strictly tourist?
It's tourism, yeah.
It is, yeah.
There was a chainsaw factory there, McCulloch Chainsaw.
Oh.
And that was the number one thing back then. I don't know now. Now I'm sure it's mostly tourism.
Right, right. From Lake Havasu to Big River, what brought you to Joshua Tree?
Well, we went back to Michigan, and I lived there for most of my life in the Detroit metro area. Marriage ended. I was a single mom for many, many years. Then we had the 2001 crash, the 2008 crash, and when you work in the finance industry, that kind of does you in. And after the last crash, I just gave up. My job was going to India, and I was supposed to train them. And I just said, no, bye-bye. I'm not going to give you my job that easy. So I packed everything up and moved to Joshua Tree. I knew my now husband, Carl. We met online. I was just like, why not? I got nothing to lose here. I'm tired of trying to look for a job here. Last time I had been laid off, I was out of work for like 3 years.
Because I also worked in the finance industry for like 15 years with numerous mergers from the like early 80s through the early 2000s. What departments were you in? Were you always in the same?
First, I worked for, it was a local finance company. We sold stocks and bonds, oldie discount. First, I was in customer service. Then I went to collections. And then I managed the money market, check writing accounts on the money markets. And then that was bought out. And then I went bye-bye. And then I went back to school, finished my degree. And then I worked in the treasury department at Ford Motor Company.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Sounds much more impressive than it is.
Yeah.
Because I didn't work for Ford. I was a contract worker.
Oh, okay. So you weren't hired directly. They just hired out.
Yeah. Right.
Gotcha. Okay. So when you got to Lake Havasu and you and your first husband are like, let's move here, was it more for hoping for more opportunity career-wise, or was there something about the desert that attracted you?
Well, I loved the lake. I'm a Michigan girl, the Great Lakes, and I loved the lake. And the contrast of the lake with the desert was fascinating to me. He had lined up a bunch of jobs, but by the time we got out there 6 months later, they weren't there any longer. So It wasn't that great of a financial opportunity. We tried to make it work. And actually, we tried to stay out west. When it looked like we had to move, we looked at Las Vegas and Phoenix. I think that's it. Las Vegas and Phoenix, because those were the closest two big cities. And we lived in Metro Detroit. We were used to big cities. But then he talked to his old boss and he wanted him back. So off to Michigan we went.
Oh, well, you tried it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Was it Carl who was familiar with Joshua Tree, or was he living here in this area when
here.
you met each other?
Yeah, he lived here. He left San Diego. He lived by the beach for many, many years. His mom took them back to Washington, D.C. She was a fascinating woman that worked for the Department of Energy. And as soon as he turned 18, he was like, bye-bye. He was done with high school and he went back to California because that's where he loved living. And then he left San Diego area and moved to Borrego Springs, middle of nowhere. But one day I got to get to that state park. I hear it's beautiful.
I haven't been either. I need to go to.
Yeah. And he did all sorts of odd jobs there. And then for some reason, he ended up in the valley, Coachella Valley, and had jobs there. And then ended up with a job up with Farrell Gas, which is up in Yucca Valley. And then he decided to move up here.
Gotcha. So when you met him online, was he already living up here?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I believe he bought the house in 2003. So he's been up here a long time.
Well, I just have to say that gives me hope, because I've been thinking about entering into the online dating world, but I'm like, who am I going to find either here or that would want to be here? So I see I'm not that far off. It's possible.
It's possible. You never know what'll happen.
Right.
There's a lot of toads out there.
Yeah, no kidding. I think well, never mind. When you sent me your photos that I will be using for the blog and for the social media, one of them was a 4 generations photo. And you were very close with your family. And the baking, I would guess, was one of the things that brought you together, it looks like.
Oh, yeah. After Grandpa died, Grandma would stay at my mom's house in Detroit with her because the roads weren't plowed up on the lake she lived on. So she couldn't access her home. So she'd shut it down in November, maybe, and then go back in March. So Grandma was with us. And the day after Thanksgiving, we were never shoppers. Mom had all the ingredients ready to go, and that was when we started Christmas baking. And her old brick house in Detroit had a glassed-in patio, and that was our big walk-in fridge for the winter.
Oh my gosh.
So we filled that walk-in fridge with cookies and all sorts of stuff. And then, of course, she never sold it. She would make huge trays and give them away to coworkers and friends and family. And that was my life, and that's what we enjoyed.
Right. And then you talked about, too, going out and actually picking fruit.
Yeah, in the summertime, we were the flavor, us 4 kids. They'd take us. Grandma lived up near Traverse City, Michigan, where there's all sorts of orchards, and we lived in central Michigan, where there's berry patches everywhere. And we'd pick the blueberries, the strawberries, the apples, the cherries, the apricots, you name it. They had us in those trees and in those fields. And then they'd go home and freeze it and create jams and, strawberry shortcake and everything. So I grew up on that stuff.
Right, right. Do you remember at what point, like how old you were when you started helping? And then at what point you just felt like there's something to this for me personally?
Well, I think once I moved out on my own and I started doing it with my own kids, because I did the same thing. I took them to the berry patches and to the orchards, and I'd say, no, eat the ones from the bushes, not in the bucket. I think I knew it then that, I loved it. And the running joke in my house when my girlfriends came over and saw the baked goods is, okay, what are you upset about now? It was just comforting. It was, I guess it was a way to gather and center myself.
Well, and because that probably, it's a good memory that you have of doing that with your own mother and grandmother. And that can be, that home feeling can be very centering.
Right.
Yeah. Have your kids likened to baking, or do they just let mom do everything and, feast?
My son works at the bakery from time to time. He's my spanakopita master. He can do baklava and he can make pies too. My brother, actually all my siblings cook because of mom and bake. And my one daughter in Scottsdale can, but she'd prefer not to. But it's my little hippie left in Michigan, Brianna, that is my baker. She takes after me. She cans and everything.
Has she been to the bakery yet since you opened?
No, Angela in Scottsdale has, but Bree hasn't gotten out here yet. In fact, she had a, this is funny, she had a oops pregnancy and brought me, believe it or not, my baker's dozen grandchild. I have 13 grandchildren.
Oh my goodness.
And I haven't got to meet him yet because he happened right when the bakery was opening.
Oh.
So hopefully before the end of summer, I get to go home and meet my baker's 13.
Wow. So how many children do you have altogether?
3.
3. Okay. And then one's in Scottsdale, one's here.
And one's in Canton, Michigan, which is outside of Detroit.
Okay. Gotcha. You initially started here baking and selling to a local cafe.
Right.
How long were you doing that before you decided, you know what, I'm going to do my own thing?
Oh, probably about 5 years in, maybe. But it took me a long time to take it from visualization to reality. A long time because of money, and I just didn't, maybe I didn't have confidence, I don't know, or the location wasn't right. You know, I chose a couple different spots, and then when this spot opened up, it's like, this is perfect. This is the absolute best spot in town.
Yeah. So walk us through from moment of conception of I am going to open my own place to actually going through that process. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts, not the least of which probably is the county.
Yeah, the county was hard, but I think mainly they were hard because they're understaffed. We follow their instructions and say, call 2 weeks before your inspection. Well, every time we followed their rules, it was 8 weeks before we got the actual inspection. So that we learned a few times, just put in for the inspection, you know. And I don't feel it's because they were inept. I just feel they're understaffed.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody we dealt with was really nice. We ended up with the building owner, my landlord, Miriam. She hooked us up with someone to help lay out the floor plan and do all the drawings for us. Luckily, we chose this side of the building because the walls were built already and it had plumbing and gas line. I wanted the middle part where the thrift store was, where it would be more warehouse looking, but then I would have had to do all the build out, move a gas line, and put in plumbing. So it's like, okay, I can work with this. So we only had to tear down a wall or two and keep everything pretty much the same. Right. It was, luckily, it could have cost a lot more, but it cost more than we thought it was going to cost anyway.
Right. I think it always does, no matter what you,
I think you need to plan for 3 times as long and at least 3 times as much money.
That's good advice for somebody who's looking to do this in the future. Yeah. And how about when you were planning like your menu and your recipes and what you were going to make? Are you specifically vegan or gluten-free? Because you do offer a bit of that.
We offer it, but because we don't have the staff, I have to do gluten-free by special order only because of cross-contamination issues.
Talk about that for somebody who is not familiar with health code.
Okay. Well, it's mainly because my sister's a celiac. She was diagnosed late in life, so she lived through a lot of inflammation. And she's so sensitive that even if she comes in the bakery, she needs to wear a mask because it's floating in the air. So I take making gluten-free seriously. I make sure no one else is working in here, so I do it on the days off. And I'll mix the pie dough, roll out the pie dough, and I'll put, or the cookies, whatever I have to do, or the cake. And it's made when no one else is working in here. Because my bread chef who works at night, he's kind of like, I love him, but he's kind of like, he reminds me of Pigpen in the Peanuts movies, but it's flour around him because he moves so fast. He's like the flour tornado. So he does amazing work, but he and gluten-free don't mix. So one day we will be able to make more gluten-free when I hired strictly a gluten-free baker, and we'll get rid of our break room and put that in there. So all they'll have their own ingredients, their own work area, and no one else will be allowed in there. It's just a matter of cross-contamination to me. I understand that some people are just sensitive and they eat it gluten-free because they're just gluten sensitive, but I actually make it to where I'm never going to be certified gluten-free, but someone should feel safe eating it.
Gotcha. Yeah. So if someone were listening and wondering what exactly it is that you offer on a typical day, can you talk about the different things that are available? Because it's not just
We have both vegan and regular options. We have always vegan pies and regular butter crust pies. We have vegan blueberry buckle, vegan brownies, my famous vegan carrot cake that we sell slices of and we sell it whole. And that's the only cake we have in the bakery daily. Every other cake is special order because we bake it by scratch for them. And it's a 2 to 3 day process depending on what they want. So then there's, and now none of these are vegan. Then we do Danish sweet rolls, braids, which is similar to a Danish. We make sweet and savory scones. We make all sorts of cookies. Oh, then we have all of our savory, which is like lunch menu and dinner menus. Most of it's available in take and bake, where you can take a pot pie, take it home and bake it. We've got 4 different flavors of pot pies. Next one up I'm experimenting with is chicken piccata pot pie because I love chicken piccata. And then we have spanakopita every day, a vegan broccoli cheese hand pie, a vegan samosa pasty. Pasty is just a hand pie, but it's bigger. And we have a traditional beef pasty and a Southwest chicken pasty. And I think that, oh, and then we make stecca every day, which is our personal pizza.
Oh, okay. I think that's what I had. A friend of mine was visiting me at the store and she was hungry. She says, I'm going to go down to the bakery. And she brought, I think, one of those bags. It's like long, like dough on the bottom.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then there was like fresh tomatoes on top and things
that's
like
a stecca.
that. It was so good.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten anything bad there. So
I love the pesto stecca. One with pesto and cheeses with feta and tomatoes. Yeah.
Has there been any inspiration from anything in the desert for any baked goods? Like
I need to
mesquite or
give
anything?
someone, I'd like to incorporate mesquite flour into some things, and I'd like to incorporate, but I don't have the knowledge. I need a local to help me with prickly pear, because I'd like to add that to a specific pie for a desert themed pie.
Nice.
Yeah.
Speaking of the desert, in your spare time, which you barely have any of, do you get out into the park often or even just into places in the desert?
I have not hiked in a while. I'm trying to remember the last time I hiked. I'm brain dead right now. I prefer sunrise hikes, especially in the summertime.
Yeah.
To get into the park before the sun rises and just be there as the sun rises hiking. That's my favorite hike. I think that's my favorite time of day here too. And I get to see it every day too now, opening the bakery because I'm here at 3 a.m. But I love the way that with the sunsets and the sunrises, the way the sun plays with the mountains and the shadows and all the lights and everything. It's my favorite time of day.
Yeah. So much change happens. I mean, sometimes I sit here and I'm actually facing your bakery where you are right now. But those mountains there get so much play all day long, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. But particularly in the morning, I love when the sun starts coming up and you see just that pink. All of a sudden they all look pink and it just, you can have a time lapse of it.
I know. Yeah,
So
cool. I've seen that on the San Bernardinos where the sun's coming up and it's just bright pink on the snow up there. And it's just so pretty.
Yeah. What would you say are some of your favorite things about living here now how long have you been here now?
11 years.
Okay. So you've had some time to, see some things. And what would you say some of your favorite things are about living here?
The quietness, the night skies, the ability to be able to go into the park any day, as long as it's not shut down. But, and because I don't get out as much as I should, I know there's tons of trails around here that I need to learn. I just don't. And I'm still a bit of a city girl. I don't like to hike alone because I'm from the East Coast, and trails are much more easier to find. They're well more defined.
More defined.
You've
Yeah,
got
I
grass and
find the
trees
same thing.
and
I
dark
agree.
dirt.
Yeah.
And when I've even doing the, what is it, 49 Palms hike up and over the little hill to the Oasis, I can get turned around in there because I'm just not used to the paths not being as well hiked. I mean, well marked as like a greener area would be. So
Right.
being that said, I don't like to hike alone. So when I get a chance, I like to find somebody to hike with. And so there goes the dilemma. I only have 2 days off. Well, really 1 day off a week. And then coordinating that with another person is the hard part.
Right, exactly. We're in an interesting time with first a pandemic, which fortunately you were able to continue working and then just offer people to come and pick up at the door, like call in
Right.
advance, pay ahead, we'll
Mhm.
have it ready for you, just pull up and pick up. But you have also had some difficulty with people coming into the bakery and being displeased with the people that are on your staff. And I have to acknowledge that I really appreciate the way you back your staff up and will not
Thank you.
tolerate any of that nonsense.
No, yeah, I've got their back. We've had some weird racial things in the beginning where they were called names. And so I put up a sign that says, "This is a no racism zone." So we had a lady flip out about that and scream in the middle of the bakery to take the sign down, and then ran off like a coward. But I'm sorry, we all come in our own colors, shapes, and sizes and orientations, and everyone is welcome here. And these people are like my family, and I'm not going to put up with it. Just like with the, because we have people of color here and different orientation, I'm not going to, I'm going to follow all the health codes and all the mandatory things that are going on with the pandemic, and it changes. So we all have to keep on top of it. But the masks are not mandatory right now. We wear masks when we wait on customers, when we come up and have to be up front. But I don't feel right asking my young kids of color to tell someone that we're not going to wait on them unless they wear a mask because of the confrontations we've already had. I don't want to put them in danger. There's some weird stuff that have happened in stores. I don't know if they have around here, but you see it on the news where people flip out because they're asked to put on a mask and things like that. And I'm not going to do that to them. 85% of our clients wear masks anyway. We may wear masks waiting on them. So I'd rather live and let people police themselves and keep my staff safe.
Again, I really acknowledge the fact that you've got their back in those situations. So
Yeah.
thank you. That's important and it's important for your staff to feel safe to come to work every day. And you're creating that environment. So I applaud you for doing that, because there are many other places that just don't care. And I'm glad that you do.
Just part of being me.
Right. Yeah. When your kids come to visit, or you have out of town visitors that come, what are some places that you, if you have time, you can take them to or recommend that they not miss?
I always take them to the park and to Keys Overlook. And depending on how much they want to hike, if they don't like hiking that much, we do the Barker Dam hike. If they're really adventurous, I like the Rhine Mountain hike because you get to see, or the Lost Horse Mine, because you can climb up behind it and see 360-degree views. I mean, both those areas. I tell them, although I haven't been up there in so long, and I hear it's really hard to get in, Pappy and Harrods is a must. Walking through Pioneer Town is a must. What else do I tell them? Because I do get that question asked by tourists too.
Exactly. Yeah, I find myself too, as you sure do. And same with Dusty, who had Dusty Deseret. When I had her on, we talked about the fact that being business owners, because our chamber is not operating,
Right.
we're kind of the concierge of, in addition to running our businesses, we are also asked for tourist information and things like that. So
yeah, those are the main things I tell them. And we always do when family comes. And then I recommend a couple, local restaurants. Well, Pappy and Harriet's was one. Because I'm really, really picky about food. I bake all day long. I don't want to eat something that I can bake better, you
Right.
know? So I spend my money wisely when I buy food. And anybody that knows that I buy from them, they should appreciate that.
It's a good sign.
Yeah.
So people can do special orders from you, can they not?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what do they do? Do they call you? Do they go online? What's the best way for them to do it?
Because there's so many variations in prices, and especially with cakes, there's so many discussions to be had about decorating. We prefer to call or come in. I mean, every time I get an email for a cake order, I say, please call the bakery. We don't have an online ordering. I suppose one day we'll get there, but with baked goods, it's kind of different. I suggest with all special orders to call or come in. Most of it can be done over the phone, especially if they've looked at the Instagram page or the Facebook page.
Right. And how far in advance should they do that to give you enough time to make sure you have the ingredients that you need to make what you're making and all that stuff?
2 to 3 business days.
Oh, okay.
And then the gluten-free takes longer because it has to be on a day we're closed.
Right.
So depending on where it falls in the week.
Okay. Great. I'm so glad you came to talk with me today, or that we were able to make the time. We've been working on this for a while.
Yeah.
So
it was busy in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It was crazy, but I don't know, that's a good sign. I mean, and people here are fairly, I would say, pretty understanding when they see something like that. And especially they know the crowds that we get on, especially Saturday mornings with the farmers market and things like that. It's no wonder things were sold out as quickly as they were. And I haven't had an opportunity to have those succulent cupcakes yet, but I definitely want to get one. Is it buttercream icing?
Yeah. My cake decorator, Anna, is amazing.
Well, then I definitely need to get more than one. My grandmother actually worked in a bakery for a really long time. She was more at the counter. She worked there for a really long time, but on holidays, she'd work usually on a Sunday or whatever holiday it was, she would work, and then whatever was left, she'd end up bringing like a pound of butter cookies. And I remember on like Easter, they would make those lamb cakes. She liked the lamb. She would bring those. So I have a soft spot for the bakery and buttercream icing. So thanks again for coming today. But before I let you go, we're going to do a little diary unlocked. I'm going to pick out, you're witnessing me choosing some random chips out of the jar to see what we get. And then I'm going to read these questions, and your answers to these questions will only be available to Patreon supporters of the podcast. So if you are listening to this podcast and you would like to become a Patreon supporter, please go to desertladydiaries.com, click on the support page, and you can get walked right through how to become a patron and get access to this exclusive content. So the questions I'm going to ask Marylee will be, what's a mistake you made that you learned the most from? Since moving to the desert, what is a new ritual or habit you have incorporated into your life? What's your favorite season and why? And the last one will be cake or ice cream, what kind? So if you're listening and you want to hear Marylee's answers to these questions, again, go out to desertladydiaries.com, click on the support page, and become a patron of the podcast. Oh, before I let you go, I have to ask, where did Boo come from?
Oh, well, it's kind of silly. We're not a nickname family, but when I was 1.5, maybe 1.5, 2 years old, I climbed up on the back of my brother's bike and got a boo-boo. I lost my toe. I didn't like to wear shoes or clothes, and I climbed up on the back of his bike in my underwear with no shoes on, and my toe got taken off. So I had a boo-boo, and everybody ended up calling me Boo-Boo. And then as I grew older, it just became Boo. So family members still call me Boo. My dad never did because his name was Lee, and I'm Mary Lee, but everyone else called me Boo.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a weird way of getting a nickname, but it works. It fits.
Yeah. And now it's Boo's Organic Oven. So
yes.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it too.
Hey there, so I have a shout out to Linda R., a new listener who currently lives in Washington, D.C., and says, I'm in transition to the desert, but until I arrive, I will absorb your podcasts. Welcome, Linda. Stop into Soul Connection and say hello when you get settled in. And a shout out to Paula B. for signing up for the weekly newsletter. Thank you, Paula. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. If you don't want to miss an episode, go to desertladydiaries.com, click on the new episode newsletter button, and sign up to have every new episode delivered directly to your email box. And may I ask a favor? Would you please go out to Instagram right now and follow @SoulConnectionJT on Instagram? Because I continue to try and raise the followers on that Instagram page so more people can discover the shop. Thanks so much for listening.